Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from today, and a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining our webinar on navigating a successful financial future. My name is Caroline. I am Global Marketing Director at the Fry Group, and I'll be your host today. I'll be joined by two of our experts at the Fry Group, Hugh Wedlock, who's Director of our Singapore business, and Jack Lear, who's our UK Financial Planning Manager. Now, over the next hour or so, we aim to simplify some of the complexities of financial planning and to help guide you back to basics and help strengthen your financial foundation for the year ahead. We'll be covering some of the fundamentals of financial well-being. We'll be taking a look at what good looks like when it actually comes to financial planning, the power of investing effectively and how that can help you to achieve your long-term financial goals. And then we'll be summarizing some key takeaways and some of the key steps that you can take to improve your financial well-being. And then to top it all off, we've got some time at the end to answer your questions. So please do type into the Q&A box, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen, and any questions that spring to mind throughout the session, and we'll try to cover as many of those as possible, as I said, towards the end. Right, so to kick things off, we're going to have a look at some of the fundamentals of financial wellness. So I'd like to invite Jack to explain to us what are some of the key steps that people can take to improve their financial well-being.
Thank you, Caroline. Hello, everyone. I hope you're well today. Yes, so to start this part of the presentation on financial well-being, let's just spend a moment thinking about what financial well-being actually means. Now, we think this is an excellent definition. It's about having a good relationship with your money and having peace of mind around your financial circumstances, enabling you to thrive in this element of your life. There's quite a lot to unpack in that definition, but let's just spend a moment thinking about one aspect, a good relationship with your money. This implies that financial well-being is more a feeling than a number. As we all know and can relate to, money can be deeply emotive. In fact, this is a really well-researched body of work. Financial decisions are actually driven by two parts of our brain. The first is our amygdala, and the second, our prefrontal cortex. Now, the amygdala is ancient. It's shared with all mammals and many common ancestors. It plays a crucial role in survival, and it invokes that classic fight or flight response. It's very strong. Conversely, the prefrontal cortex evolved much later, and it's the region of our brain that deals with logical decision-making. Now, as we know, sometimes these things, when making financial decisions, conflict with one another. They pull in different directions. We've probably all experienced that at least at one point in our lives. So your amygdala is a stronger system and will ultimately prevail. Now, understanding the neurology of money and the impact it has is a crucial step in mastering financial well-being. Remember that financial well-being is more of a feeling than a number. But don't worry, I'll shortly come on to share some good habits and practical steps which can help curate that financial well-being. So what I'd like to do now is just move on to a quick poll. You've probably all heard the phrase or the quote that money can't buy you happiness, and the counter quote in front of you, whoever said money doesn't buy you happiness doesn't know where to shop. So with that in mind, and linking back to what we've just explained, that money is more of a feeling, financial well-being is more of a feeling than a number, I'd like to run a poll. And the poll is, which of the following spending categories do you believe will have the greatest positive impact on your overall well-being? So if you were to spend money and allocate income or resource to which of these categories, which do you think would have the greatest impact on your financial well-being? So let's just run that for a moment. I'll wait for the results to come in. Okay, brilliant. So some really, really interesting results there, and they actually correlate to what a lot of the research shows us. So we've got a broad spread of results across three of those options, and one a bit lower. And the lower one, quite rightly, is consumption and shopping. So what the research shows us is that shopping and consuming goods often gives us a very short-term boost. But actually, the lasting impact on financial well-being and overall well-being is somewhat limited. Now, the jury's out amongst the other three, but let's just explore those. So gifting to others, and experience and travel, often with people, of course, that we love and care about, really can move the needle in our feeling of well-being, as can buying time through outsourcing things like household tasks. So the purpose of that poll was really just to reinforce this link between money, our finances, and its ability to impact on our well-being. Moreover, we have the choice in how we allocate money and our financial resource, which can directly impact the feeling of well-being. So just some really key principles to bear in mind as we move through this presentation today. As I said earlier, I'd like to share with you some good habits and practical steps. So why habits? Well, Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. So this wisdom can be applied to curating success in financial well-being. There are 5 habits which I'd like to share with you today that I've observed throughout my professional career of people and clients who exhibit high levels of financial well-being. The first habit is intentional spending, making conscious decisions and allocating your money on things that matter to you. Number 2, spend less than you earn. You will never build wealth, and you will struggle to build financial resilience and breathing space if you don't do this. We have to be mindful of something called lifestyle creep. That's the principle when our income expands, so does our outgoings. We don't build wealth, and therefore all that happens is our cash flow increases. So spend less than you earn. Start saving early. Your best friend in investing is time. Manage your debt wisely. Debt can be a force for good, but mismanaged, it can put a stranglehold on your financial position and feeling of well-being. So manage debt wisely. Set clear financial goals. A goal is a dream with a deadline. A financial goal simply adds a monetary figure to that dream. So now I've introduced you to those 5 key habits. What I'd like to do is move on to some practical steps related to those habits. The first habit I talked about was intentional spending. And the practical step here is creating a budget. Step 1 is simply to do a financial audit. Understand where your money goes today. You might be surprised in what you find. There might be an opportunity to redirect money for areas where it's not adding much value to areas where you know it can move the needle on your financial well-being. Once you've got that understanding, you can start to make conscious decisions on allocating money to things that matter. So step 2, of course, is to take action. Spend less than you earn. The first thing we should look to do with spending less than we earn is to build an emergency fund. A fund for a rainy day. Now, the reason for this is that it can give you breathing space and financial resilience for unexpected events that may come up throughout your life. A rule of thumb, we would say, look to build pot of money, 3 months of expenditure, plus any planned capital expenditure that you've got. Have it really easy to access, so if you need it, you can get it quickly. Step 3, we talked about start saving early. So saving and investing for the long term is really important, and time is your best friend when it comes to investing. So to illustrate that point, imagine that you're at the start or towards the start of your financial journey and you're looking to save for your future self. Specifically, you're looking to save for retirement. The amount that you put aside in order to achieve a successful retirement will largely depend on the age at which you start saving. The rule of thumb is 50% of your age. So if you started at 30, you'd need to put aside 15% of your earnings in order to build a pot of money for your future self so you can retire successfully. Start at 22, it's 11%. Conversely, start at 40 and it's 20%. This just illustrates the point that time is your best friend. Starting early is really important. We'll move on now to managing your debt wisely. I mentioned that debt can be a force for good. So a really good way to think about debt is first to categorize it into 2 separate pots. Let's think about good debt and bad debt. Good debt typically has these characteristics. It's typically longer term, typically lower interest rate, and is used to purchase assets which would appreciate over time. Of course, an example would be a mortgage on a property, or perhaps investing in yourself in education. Bad debts would have these characteristics: shorter term, higher interest rates, and used to purchase something that either has no value or depreciates over time. So once you've categorized your debt, you can then look to tackle, and the focus should be on eliminating the bad debt first. There are a couple of ways in which you can do this. There's a conventional approach, which simply says, within that basket of bad debt, which is the highest interest rate, and let's try and pay that off first. That's a very valid approach. The second approach would be to say, within that pot of bad debt, which debt has the lowest value that I could clear the quickest? And you clear that one first, and then allocate the money you were putting to that to the next, and to the next, and to the next. And that's called the snowball approach, and you start to build momentum. That starts to play into some of our psychology of getting things done and getting that endorphin kick. It's horses for courses, but there are 2 possible approaches you could take. The final one that I would like to go through is to set clear financial goals. There's a 4-step process here that we've pulled together. I think this covers off the basis. So first of all, remember, a goal is a dream with a deadline. A financial goal adds a monetary value to that. First of all, have an understanding of your short, medium, and long-term goals. Not everything is for the far, far future. We've got to have things along the way that we want to achieve. And so short, medium, and long-term, categorize those according to time. Come up with that monetary figure, then manage your money effectively over time. You've got to take into account both the longer term and the shorter term goals and objectives. So a balanced approach is right. Of course, final step, it's worth reviewing your goals and making sure that you're having fun along the way. So just to bring this to life, let's put an example to this goal setting. Imagine, again, you're towards the start of your financial journey, you're 25 years old, and you'd like to buy a house by the time you're 30. You've got 5 years. You know it's a 5-year goal. You also have calculated that based on your salary, you think you're going to be able to borrow about £400,000. You'd like to spend £500,000. So you need a deposit of £100,000 to be successful in achieving this goal. You already have £20,000 saved, which leaves a shortfall of £80,000. And you've got 5 years. So we know this is £16,000 a year, £1,333 per month. You get to 1 year, you review your savings, and you haven't achieved your target. Don't despair, there's some options. You can look to save more in the remaining 4 years, Alternatively, you could push the time frame out to give yourself a bit more time to achieve that goal, or you could recalibrate your aspirations and look to purchase a house at a slightly lower value. I hope that those examples and those practical steps have been useful. And with that, I will pass over to Caroline and join you shortly for questions.
Super. Thank you very much, Jack, for those tips. Now, let's move on to the next important topic. What does good look like when it comes to financial planning? Hugh, here's Hugh. Could you please share your insights on how we can build an effective financial plan?
Thanks, Caroline. Hello, everyone. Now, the first thing that I'm going to talk to you about today is what we believe to be the most important elements of a robust financial plan. And they are threefold, namely risk mitigation, saving and investing cost efficiently, and finally, optimizing for tax. So let's take a look at each of those in turn. Risk mitigation. Now, the foundation of a robust plan is to mitigate as much as possible the financial risks that you will come across during your lifetime. These are risks such as unexpected expenditures, losing your job, a period of serious illness, or even your early death. Now, there are some straightforward steps that you can take to prepare for these things, such as, firstly, ensuring that you have an emergency fund saved up, and we usually recommend 6 months of your committed outgoings here. Secondly, reviewing whether you have any employment income protection in place. And thirdly, making absolutely sure that anyone who is dependent on you is financially secure in the event of your serious illness or early death. So once you've thought about and planned for financial risk, you can move on to consider saving and investment. Now, this can be done using surplus income, and either on a regular basis, so for example, monthly, or on an ad hoc or lump sum basis, if, for example, you've been paid a bonus. There are a number of factors to consider when you're beginning to build an investment portfolio. Notably, the amount of investment risk that you are comfortable taking and your financial capacity to take that risk. Secondly, the amount of time you're planning to invest for. But normally we would recommend a minimum investment time horizon of at least 5 years, where risk assets like equities and bonds are involved. And finally, the cost of making those investments. It's critical that you are fully aware of the cost of any investing that you do, because costs are a factor that can significantly eat into your ultimate investment returns. So the cost of investing should be fully transparent, clearly explained to you, and match as much as possible the actual performance of the underlying asset that is in question. So once you've mitigated the financial risk in your life and you're now saving and investing cost efficiently, you need to consider tax. It's important to ensure that you have a plan in place that minimizes tax and reduces the friction of it, both in terms of the growth of your investments and the income that you may draw down from your investments, either now or in the future. A key factor in terms of the levels of taxation of your investment growth and income is where you are resident when you're accumulating your wealth and when you start to draw down on it. And in some cases, your nationality and or domicile position also plays an important role here. Now, this can be a complex area, and you might want to take some professional advice on it, particularly if you're a resident in a jurisdiction which is highly complex or high tax, or in the case of the UK, both of those things. So I'm going to move on now to talk about the importance of regular reviews, and I'm also going to talk briefly about cash flow modeling. Because once you have your financial plan in place, it doesn't end there. There are external factors that could potentially blow your plan off course, and your personal circumstances are very likely to change to at least some degree. So it's vital that you regularly review progress of your plan and adjust it in line with the goals that you set for that plan at outset. How do we do that review? Well, we use a system that we call cash flow modeling. And this involves projecting the growth of your asset base, taking into account your likely income and spending levels over time. Some assumptions need to be made that go into the model, and they can also be revised over time, and are things like investment growth levels, what we think the prevailing rate of inflation is going to be, any income that you require, and your planned retirement date. So we've now got a short video to show you how that all works.
Hi, my name is Harry. I'm a financial planner and I'm here to talk to you about the benefits of cash flow modelling and how we use it to map out a client's financial journey, give informative financial recommendations, and ultimately help our clients to achieve their goals and ambitions. So, let's take a look at how we do that. We start on the dashboard of our cash flow model system, and it's here where we can input your goals, such as how much you want to spend on a month-to-month basis, or how much you want to spend on holidays each year. And we also input details such as your income and the assets you've built up over time. We can then move on to the timeline. And the timeline is where we can input all of your future life events or any anticipated life events. On the timeline, we can map out the various stages of your life. We can start at pre-retirement, moving on to retirement, and then care in later life. We can then look at specific objectives that you might have throughout your life. For example, paying for school fees or university fees, paying for house renovations, a wedding, mapping out when you might want to retire, or any travel goals you have. We can then move on to the output of the cash flow. This is the base plan. The base plan is a snapshot of where you are today, taking into account your existing income and your existing savings. The black line running from left to right across the screen shows your total expenditure each year, and this is based on the goals we've input previously. For example, how much you want to spend on a month-to-month basis and your holidays. The coloured bars are your sources of income. For example, in pre-retirement, your expenditure is met entirely from your salaries. Whereas in retirement, you become reliant on your liquid assets, such as your savings and investments, and your pensions, to meet those expenses. In this example, a shortfall has been identified, which is shown by the red bars. This means that the liquid assets have been depleted, and your full expenditure cannot be met. As a financial planner, the shortfall identified would enable me to make recommendations to help my client mitigate this shortfall. One of these recommendations could be to save more during pre-retirement. Cash flow modelling is an excellent tool to show a client various scenarios and allows us to map out any recommendations and assess their impact. As you can see, in this scenario, we have increased the level of savings into their investments in pre-retirement, which allows us to fully mitigate the shortfall without it impacting the client's goals. As you can see, cash flow modelling can have a real impact on a client's ability to meet their goals and helps to avoid any nasty surprises along their journey.
Thank you very much, Hugh, and thanks to Harry for that excellent example of cash flow modelling. Right, so now we've got a good idea of what a robust financial plan looks like. Let's move on to consider investments. Now, Albert Einstein famously said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. Hugh, can you please help us try to understand what he meant by that and how we can use smart investing to help to work towards our long-term financial goals?
Sure, thanks, Caroline. So why do we need to think about investing for the long term? Well, I've got a chart to share with you here that's going to try to help me answer that question. And what it demonstrates is the need to achieve positive real return from your investments. And what I mean by that is a positive return after you've adjusted for the effects of inflation. Because if you don't manage to achieve that, over time, your purchasing power will diminish. In other words, you want to make sure that your money grows faster than the growth in the rate of prices. So you can see 3 lines on this graph. The grey line at the bottom of the page shows your returns on cash in US dollar terms since the start of the century, with the orange line showing the growth of inflation and the dark blue line showing the performance of the global equity market over that same time period. So the chart shows if I don't invest, I stay in cash, it's very unlikely that the value of my money will keep up with the growth of inflation, thus reducing my purchasing power over the long term. And this has been true even through a period of relatively low inflation, which is what we saw between 2009 and 2022. However, as the dark blue line shows, the equity market, i.e. stocks and shares, has historically grown much faster than the growth in the prevailing rate of inflation. This shows the importance of taking some controlled investment risk in order to grow your money and achieve your long-term financial goals. The graph also shows the importance of investing for the long term, and whilst doing so, being aware that there is a relationship between investment risk and the rewards that you ultimately get from that investment. You can see that whilst the equity market should achieve good levels of capital growth over time, it is much more volatile than simply holding cash. In order to achieve reasonable levels of capital growth, you need to take some risk. And that means accepting some investment volatility. Now we can control this volatility by making sure that we accurately gauge your attitude to investment risk. And what I mean by risk here is changes to the value of your investment portfolio. It's also important to gauge your capacity for risk, i.e. would a significant reduction in the value of your investment really jeopardize your long-term financial plan and the goals that are associated with it. Having an appropriately diversified portfolio is a key part of the overall investment process because it enables you to control risk and it keeps you within the overall risk category that's right for you as an individual. So I'd now like to share another short video from our investment team, which will demonstrate how we achieve that diversification.
Hi everybody, my name is Ian Hooper. I am the Chief Investment Officer. And today we're talking about the power of investing. So we're going to be talking around the asset types available to you as investors, the benefits of staying invested in the market, the benefits of diversifying your investment portfolio, and also not letting emotions drive your investment decisions. So firstly, let's introduce the main investable asset classes. So firstly, we've got equities. Now, these represent a share in listed companies. And then we've got bonds, which are debt issued by listed companies and countries. And then finally, we've got cash. So as you can see now, this next graphic really shows that power of staying invested. And this is demonstrated by a range of equity and bond total returns going right back to 1950. So if you extend your time horizons, which is time in the market, the balance of probability is overwhelmingly in your favour. So if you had invested for 20 years, there was never a period when you did not make a positive return, whether you were invested just in equities, bonds, or a mix of both. However, the next graphic shows what can happen if you miss just a few of the best days of strong returns and how it can dramatically impact your overall performance. Compounding is growth upon growth upon growth, and it cannot be underestimated in terms of achieving your financial goals. So to illustrate this compounding effect, let's look at 2 different starting points for starting your financial plan. So if you start your plan aged 25 and you invest £5,000 annually, and we assume a 5% growth rate per year, by the age of 65, which is when quite often people retire, your pot will have grown to £639,000 sterling. However, if you wait till the age of 45 to start the same investment plan, your pot will have only grown to £179,000. So now that you can see the power of compound growth over time, let's take a look at what happens when we actually reinvest the dividends from our investments over time. So as you can see from the graphic, each pot effectively doubles in size by reinvesting the dividends, this is based on 3%, year on year. That's a really powerful effect, and again shows the power of compound growth and compound growth in dividends. So one of the key messages about today is do not put all your eggs in one basket in terms of investment. Year-on-year asset class performance is unpredictable, though we know that by diversifying across a number of core asset classes, this can help reduce risk. Let's just feature one of those sub-asset class performances. So in 2022, it was commodities that was the best performing sub-asset class. If we highlight that over a number of years, we can also see some years it was the bottom performing asset class. So if we combine commodity performance over a 10-year period, the annualized return was actually towards the very bottom of the sub-asset classes, but it was the highest in terms of volatility or risk. So a better way to consider investment is to blend these sub-asset classes. And you can see on the screen by the grey boxes our hypothetical portfolio. And it shows here you can achieve a greater return for the risk you are taking. And again, if we go on the right-hand side, we can see our blended hypothetical portfolio has one of the highest returns over a 10-year period with a lower level of volatility. So far we've talked about the asset classes available to investors. We've talked about time in the market. Now let's talk about the emotions of investing in the stock market. Let's look at US markets over the past 20 years and how they've performed. So if we focus on 2008, over the year, the market fell by 37%. Well, why did it do that? It fell because we had a global financial crisis, we had banks going out of business, we had a global recession. And it's times like this where investors fear markets falling further and they exit the financial market just at the wrong time. And if you'd have done that as an investor, you'd have missed out on the strong returns that followed in the next 5 or 6 years. Let's look at a history of the market ups and downs for the US market. So market ups we call bull markets, market downs we call bear markets. So what's the pattern over a long period of time? Well, firstly, as we can see, there's a lot more periods of bull markets or rising markets over a long period of time. And these bull markets tend to last for a long time and they rise to a high percentage return value. Bear markets, however, tend to be quite short in nature and quite sharp in terms of market declines. But the good news for investors is by staying invested, we get more bull markets than bear markets, and markets rise over a long period of time. So it's a natural instinct when faced with a bear market to withdraw your funds. But in fact, as the chart shows, it's likely that this situation will be temporary and will convert into a bull market scenario in the future. The key here is to manage your emotions, hold out and remain invested. It's also important to resist the urge to chase the markets. Greed and fear often drive investor behaviour with a fear of missing out on possible future returns. So investors chase the market when it's overvalued and they don't invest or sell when markets are falling. And this really highlights the importance to take emotion out of the investment process. So in conclusion, the key takeaways are understanding the different asset classes, the benefits of staying invested even during market downturns, the benefits of diversifying your portfolio, and finally, taking emotions out of your investment decisions.
So by way of summary, I'd like to thank Ian there and just reminded everyone that investing is, in summary, about holding a diverse portfolio of liquid assets that are tailored accurately to your personal risk profile and then holding that portfolio for the long term. However, you may choose to invest a portion of your wealth on what can be referred to as passion assets. These are things like watches, cars, wine, whatever takes your fancy, really. But always bear in mind that these assets are often highly volatile. They're not very liquid, and they're not regulated either, meaning that they're not subject to any investor protection regimes.
Thank you, Hugh, and thank you very much, Ian, for that video. There's a valuable takeaway here, I think, that for me. The longer you invest, the lower the risk of losing your money, echoing Warren Buffett's famed wisdom that it's time in the market and not timing the market. Okay, so we've covered off the basics of financial well-being. We've discussed what makes a good financial plan, and we've taken a look at effective investing. So let's round up the key points that we've covered today. And we've highlighted here what we believe are the 7 key takeaways from all of the topics that our speakers have covered in today's session. And rather than talk through each of them again, Hugh, perhaps you can help us to narrow this down. If you can leave our audience today with just one key takeaway, what would your one key takeaway be?
Thanks, Caroline. I think I'll cheat a little bit and I'll fuse 2 of them, which are 3 and 4. So number 3 is start saving early and make regular saving a habit. Number 4 is the power of compounding. Obvious thing to do, fuse those 2 together, because the earlier you do start planning, the earlier you start investing, the greater the ability you have to harness the very considerable power of compounding to your benefit.
Great, that was definitely a cheat there, merging those 2 points together, but we'll take it. Jack, thank you. Same to you, please. One key takeaway.
I think I'm going to be a bit naughty as well then, as Hugh's set the tone. I'm going to go for 2 and 7. So for me, being intentional about our financial habits, spending in this example, really, really powerful habit that will set you up well for the future. And it's one of those foundational elements that if we don't get right, then actually the other things, the nice to haves in your financial plan and in giving financial advice or receiving financial advice, they're not going to stack up if you don't get that base level right. So intentional spending for me, really important. And then I'm going to go down to 7. And the reason I'm going to go down to 7 is because we advisors, we are planners, we are very forward looking, and we do like to think about goals. And goals are really important, don't get me wrong. But the joy is in the journey. And, I have observed people that sacrifice a lot to achieve a goal. And the feeling of the achievement of the goal, if you sacrifice too much, it's not worth it at the sacrifice and expense of enjoying the journey. So for me, like, it's really, really important to get that balance of having some view of the future and some goals and dreams and ambitions, but also having fun day to day.
Good. You definitely both cheated there, because that last one, enjoying the journey, was going to be my key takeaway. So very good. Thank you very much both for that. Right. We're coming towards the end of our session today. So I think now it's time to ask some of the questions that you've been typing in as we go along. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask, please do use that Q&A box now at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try and get through as many as possible. But to kick things off and to start where we just ended up, Hugh, how can we actually manage to strike that balance between enjoying our life today and still saving and preparing for the future?
I think it's a very good idea to have a good think about risk in the round, or financial risk in the round. And once you've had that sort of internal conversation, if you like, and you're comfortable with the level of risk you're taking, and you've also taken all the measures that you possibly can to mitigate that risk, I think it's a lot easier to go and enjoy your life. So when I'm talking about a kind of conversation about risk in the round, I am, go back to those 3 points we were making earlier. Are you have you removed as much financial risk out of your life as you can? Are you comfortable that you're saving and investing in a way that is sustainable for you, but also cost effective? And where are you going to be when you want to start drawing down on your investments? Are you comfortable that you're on track to deliver enough kind of capital and income for when you do want to start living on the money that you've accumulated? I think if you can kind of tick all those 3 boxes, then you can sort of, well, and of course you review regularly, you can kind of walk away and go and enjoy the other bits of your life, if you like.
Sounds good, thank you. Not unrelated, next question, Jack, I think for you. In your experience of working with clients, what would you say is the magic number needed for retirement? Sorry, difficult question.
Yeah, difficult question. We do like rules of thumbs and magic numbers and that sort of thing. But I suppose that when we're thinking about retirement, I assume we're sort of talking about that point in time when you have accumulated enough assets and wealth so that you no longer need to work to provide the income that you need to sustain your lifestyle. So, you know, I think retirement, I'll just use interchangeably with financial freedom and sort of have that definition, building up assets to a point where you no longer have to work. You might want to work, you might choose to work, you don't have to. I think the magic number for me is you got to understand what your future lifestyle is going to look like and how much that's going to cost. So let's say you've decided that, you know, for the lifestyle that you want, that's going to make you happy, you need £40,000 per year. The magic number or the rule of thumb is multiply that by 25, and that will give you a rough idea of where you need to be with the assets you've accumulated to have financial freedom to retire. So £40,000 per year multiplied by 25, million pounds would give you £40,000 per year income, providing that's of course the lifestyle that you know, the number you need to give you a lifestyle. That's how I'd go about it in just a very simple way.
Got it. Thank you, Jack. Hugh, I think this would be a good one for you, considering you're based in Singapore. Do you have anything to say about currency fluctuation where earning or expenditure are in different countries?
Crikey, that's a good question. I think when you're thinking about currency, it's easy to get quite confused because the currency markets are very volatile in nature. I think it is always helpful to think of currency in pairs. So if, for example, you are resident in Singapore, but you know you're ultimately going to be drawing down perhaps as a resident of the UK in sterling terms, then obviously the currency pair you need to keep your eye on is Sing dollar sterling. So when the Sing dollar is strong, you might consider repatriating some of those dollars back to the UK, vice versa. And that would work for whatever kind of jurisdiction that you were thinking of traveling to or becoming resident in. One other thing I would say there is a lot of people aren't clear on that. A lot of people really don't know where they're going to end up. And I guess there's a couple of different approaches that you can take there. You can kind of base yourself in one currency that is a proxy for almost everywhere. And I guess I've got the US dollar probably heaviest in my mind there. Or you can try and expose yourself to in a fairly equal manner to a basket of major currencies and kind of hedge your bets a little bit. I've probably gone on a little bit there, but that's probably that's the long and short. I hope that's helpful.
Great, thank you, Hugh. Any tips for people who start late or who have had a major change in life, which has affected their ability to save for the long term? Jack, I think that probably most closely relates to some of your last points.
Yeah, it's a really good question, isn't it? And we talked about those habits and practical steps in a quite sort of utopian way, I suppose, and that doesn't often meet with reality. Look, sometimes there's that sort of reset option to understand where you are and where you want to get to. And then it's thinking about the practical steps you can take. So, you know, investing is an important part of journey of creating wealth over time, but that time element is really important as well. So, do you need to reassess when it is you may want to take retirement? Is that where we want to go with the conversation, or does the decision hinge more on readjusting what your future lifestyle may look like? And I realize these are really challenging questions. So of course it depends on your situation, but the levers that you have, yeah, the time and the amount of money that you will need for your future lifestyle, they're the ones that can really influence the output.
Good, thank you, Jack. The next question, I'm not sure which of you would like to address this one. What impact do you think a change in government this year will have on people's financial plans and investments?
Can I go first?
Go for it. Thank you, Hugh.
Okay. Right. So I think in terms of maybe the gist of this question is, will there be significant change if we get a Labour government? And my take on that would be that overall levels of personal taxation probably won't change to any great degree, because personal taxation or direct taxation in the UK as a percentage of GDP is also very high. Sorry, is already very high, and I don't think Labour have the have the ability to push it up much further as a proportion of GDP than it's currently at. But here's the sort of caveat. I think the emphasis of that taxation could change slightly, and I'll flag up a couple of things there. I think that Labour will be keener to tax capital, and what I mean by that is I think they will be keener to target capital gains, probably inheritance tax, as kind of ways to generate slightly more tax revenue. One of the things they've talked about many times is kind of equalizing the rate between income and gains, for example. The other thing I would flag up is non-doms. So the other thing that Labour have really kind of majored on is they want to end what they see as the quite beneficial tax position that a non-dom can enjoy, certainly in the early years of a period of residence in the UK. And I think they can make an awful lot more money out of that than they physically can, to be honest. But I think they viewed that cohort of people as perhaps a group of people who aren't sort of politically hugely popular. So I think that's probably their, from a personal taxation point of view, I think that's probably the direction of travel if Labour got in, and the things that we would be flagging up. Although of course we are not going to know about this stuff until the event actually happens and they're in power.
So I'm going to answer that question in a slightly different way, or add to Hugh's comment a slightly different way with my financial well-being hat on, if that's okay. With well-being in general, if you relate it to, say, emotional well-being or physical well-being, what you'll hear a lot is this, term about building in resilience and having an understanding of your sphere of control. So we don't want to worry about things that are outside of our sphere of control. So that's easier said than done. Some practical things we can do is build resilience. If that's physical well-being, building resilience is, trying to keep yourself fit and healthy. In an emotional sense, you might be partaking in sort of gratitude or, mindfulness. That helps build resilience for these external influences, these macro influences that could otherwise rock the boat. And in a financial sense, if we think about what financial well-being is, it's that relationship with money and having peace of mind, so you can, have a really good life and not worry about your money ultimately. Who wants to spend their day worrying about their financial position? I certainly don't. So how do you build resilience? It's everything we've just talked about. It's those good financial habits. It's putting some of those things into action, building up an emergency fund, not only for unexpected expenditure that might come along, but also if you're really not happy in your occupation, your occupational well-being's low, you're really not happy in your job and you've got some cash savings there, you can step away from your job you don't have to worry about it. You can remove that from your life. So for me, that building resilience can really help reduce the impact and even worry about all of these things that are outside of our control.
Good advice there. Thank you, Jack. Where should we go next? Quite a few questions coming in still. I'm not sure if you can comment on this, but can you comment on how to hedge against inflation once retired? Hugh, any comment on that?
I think, yeah, go back to some of the points we made earlier on around, even in retirement, you need to stay invested. You're going to have to expose yourself to some risk assets, equities and bonds, in order for the value of your money to keep pace with the growth in prices. There's not a lot you can do about that. I think that's all I could say there.
Fair enough.
Yeah, same. Spot on. I think the worst thing you can do is try and dip in and out of markets, going in and out of cash, responding to these external events. The way to the data, the track record of real assets, so buying into the best businesses in the world through entering global equities, that's how you preserve real value of capital over time, and that is the answer.
I think that was the point quite nicely demonstrated in one of Ian's slides in the earlier video.
Absolutely.
So I think we're sort of coming towards the end of the session, but I think we've got time for one or two more questions. Hugh, back to you. What are some of the common pitfalls that you see people fall into when it comes to financial planning and investing?
Okay, so I think the first one I would flag up is risk. So are you taking an appropriate level of risk? Split that down into those two areas. That's about things moving up and prices moving up and down, and it's also about the capacity for risk that you have as an individual. Because with the best will in the world, we don't want to be taking an awful lot of investment risk with someone who's got £500,000 sterling and has no ability to kind of replenish that at any point. We would not be recommending a high risk portfolio to that person, for example. So make sure you've got risk right, and risk is dynamic. So you do need to regularly review that, because people's attitude to risk and their capacity for risk changes over time. And other thing I'd say is be realistic. Jack was talking about lifestyle earlier on. Your magic number is almost entirely related to the lifestyle that you want once you're living off what you've earned in during your career. So be realistic about what that lifestyle is, and be realistic about the cost of it, because it's easy to kind of underestimate or overestimate what you have versus your expectations.
Great, thank you very much. And this is a great question. And thank you very much to this attendee for mentioning it. We haven't mentioned property yet. Where does property lie in a portfolio? Jack, come on.
That one to go. Yeah. So we talked about sort of risk assets and sort of real assets, if you like. So these assets that can protect us against inflation over time. The equity markets, buying in businesses is a really good way to do that. There's definitely data support that bricks, property is a good way to do that as well. I think the reality when we look at financial planning is that the majority of individuals' wealth is already in property, right? We already live in homes, and therefore, if you look at the overall balance of your portfolio, the chances are you've got a very high exposure to property in the country that you reside in. So it's not always sensible, of course, to add to that already heavy position, which is why the majority of portfolios that we would manage for clients wouldn't include a high degree of property exposure.
Great, thank you. Hugh, anything to add to that?
Only that, yeah, it's become an increasingly problematic to add kind of securitized property into investment portfolios. Yeah, the interest rate sort of the interest rate environment over the last couple of years has not been good for that as a sector, and I think there is still some some doubts over the viability of that sector over the long term. I'm not the investment guy on this call, but you need to. I think you need to own your own home, no question. And buy to let has been a reasonable investment in the UK for some time, although the government are gradually kind of making that less and less attractive. Securitized property is quite difficult to hold in portfolios. So that's the kind of long and short, I think.
Great, thank you very much, Jack. Thank you very much, Hugh. Hopefully you found today's session useful. If you'd like to follow up on any of the things we talked about today or have further questions that we haven't managed to get to, please do get in touch. If you'd like to have a deeper dive into some specific areas of your financial planning, please head over to our website where you'll find a host of downloadable guides, a couple of examples on screen now. And finally, for those of you who are not familiar with the Fry Group, we're a UK headquartered wealth, tax and estate planning company. We've been providing advice to people in the UK and all over the world for more than 125 years. And we've often worked with families throughout generations over that time to help them achieve their version of financial freedom. Today, our team of experts look after thousands of clients from all over the world, from our offices in Europe, in Asia, and also in the Middle East. Now, I'll leave you here with our contact details if you'd like to get in touch. And it just leaves me to say thank you very much to everybody for joining us today.